Good morning and welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. Today I'm going to talk about two of my book clubs choosing from last month. And I wasn't able to do the third one because the way they've got the timing organized, it doesn't synchronize. There's a good word for the first thing in the morning, synchronize. So the first book that my adults for reading YA literature looked at was Keep This to Yourself by Tom Ryan. Tom Ryan is a Nova Scotian author, and I guess that set us up for expecting this book to be set in Nova Scotia. I don't know why. That was a little bit of a big assumption on our part. So this is a thriller, I guess. He's written another one now, which I did read. Oh. All right, so I didn't write that down, but he did write another one. This one is about a serial killer who has terrorized this small seaside village of Camera Cove, killing 4 people before disappearing without a trace. Like everyone else in town, 18-year-old Mac Bell has been trying to move on from the tragedy. Easier said than done when Mac's best friend, Golden Boy Connor Williams, was the final victim. But Mac is starting to accept that he might never find closure until he discovers a note from Connor left for him the night he died. A note hinting he'd found out the killer's identity and needed Mac's help. Now Mac's on a mission to solve Connor's murder once and for all, and nobody, friends, neighbors, or even the cute stranger with his own connection to the case, is beyond suspicion. So, sounds like a good plot line, and it almost was. There were 4 friends, Mac, Connor, 2 girls, and another fellow, and the 5 of them trailed along together through most of their childhood. They all lived more or less on the same street, and they were, I guess, best buddies, mostly by proximity than by inclination. And Mac is devoted to Connor. There's really nothing wrong that Connor can do that Mac really sees. He's got a rationalization or something for whatever. And as the story progresses, we learn that Mac is homosexual, but not really active. He's still working that part of his life out. And one of his dilemmas was, internal dilemmas was, Mac his best friend, or was it that Mac loved Connor in a passionate kind of a way? So that's one of the dilemmas. The 2 girls in the story are less than impressed with Connor over the years and have drifted away as they've become less dependent on school buses and that sort of thing. And also as their own family dynamics have moved them out of the neighborhood a little bit. So we revisit the whole serial killer case. Connor is dead at the beginning of the stories. There's no, that's in the blurb, so there's no spoilers in that, but we don't really get to know Connor except through descriptions. We don't get any little flashbacks of any of his best friends' encounters with him. It's more of a recounting, so we don't really get to know Connor, except that it's revealed more and more that he really was a shit. And only Mac can't see it. And the clues lead Mac to the cousin of one of the victims, who is from a black family in the nearby town. And he has an interest in the case because he does not believe that his cousin would have ever commit suicide, which is what the sort of starting point was on her murder. But then as the evidence comes along, we realize that it was part of the serial killing trajectory, I guess. But it's not logical, and so this friend is also on the case. Mac becomes completely enmeshed in the case, and the friend is more, what should I say? He's more interested in Mac and kind of the thrill of the chase, the thrill of being related to someone who was murdered. He's not terrifically sincere in that regard. But we don't discover that until things go on. None of us in the book club loved this. I would say it got a fairly resounding meh. the conclusion, you know, without giving away too much more of the plot, the conclusion was, some of them had seen it coming. I hadn't seen it coming, but the others had seen it coming. And they just found it completely unsatisfactory, as did I once it was revealed. It was like, oh no, that couldn't possibly, that's just dumb. And then as we started to parse it apart and look at the plot lines and look at the sequencing of things, a whole bunch of illogical things crept up, not the least which was the final scene in a hurricane that just was so implausible. And yeah, so it didn't do well for any of us. I think it was pretty disappointing, partly because it was set in an American coastal town, and Tom Ryan certainly has his an abundance of coastline had he chosen to set it anywhere in Nova Scotia. So he lost a point there, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, did not love this one, did not love his other one, and can't even say that I would recommend it. I think there are better YA thrillers out there. So too bad for Tom Ryan, because in a way he's got a good skill set for writing a sentence, let's say. But even the characters weren't that differentiated. I mean, yeah, really. Nice guy, not a great good book. Son of a Trickster by Eden Robinson. She is the author of Monkey Beach, which someone tells me that I read, but I have no recollection of it. This is in the tradition of First Nations telling a story that is both their everyday reality, and then the mythic, magical, supernatural component starts to travel in. So Jared is about grade 10. He's got a pretty wackadoodle mom. She's pretty drug involved and drinking involved, and I'm not sure how much of that is her way of coping with her own magical situation, and how much of that is just being an alcoholic. That part's not especially clear, but she's a tough nut. And so is his grandmother on his mother's side. His grandmother on his father's side is a different kind of tough nut, because she's got an outward persona that is crisp and modern and sophisticated, but turns out she's a hereditary witch from long tradition. So Jared is not magical. He doesn't seem to. They call him special needs magical, because he's just not there. He doesn't engage. Every time someone tries to give him some information, he's just like la 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 la. So by the time he hits grade 10, he's so ill prepared for what puberty and coming of age as a man and all those things are inevitably going to happen for him. And his mom has been trying to protect him for all these years. So we see Jared mostly over the course of a year, and the neighbors have been really involved in his later childhood and teenage years. Mr. Jacks is getting ongoing Alzheimer's, and Mrs. Jacks has cancer. And so there has to be a transition, because just from health reasons, something has to change. And part of that is Sophie enters the story, and she is there to basically be the caregiver for her grandparents, which is so crazy from like you just can't send a 14, 15-year-old into a situation like that and expect success. So you can see these two young teenagers are up against all kinds of logistical things. Things are not going well for either of them, and the magic is creeping in. And Sophie has not had any kind of, what would you say, sort of grooming, I guess? Like, none of the mythic stories are part of her childhood. But whereas Jared has, his parents and his mother and his nannies have all, had this as part of the table conversation, so he's aware of a lot of the ingredients of a magical world, but hasn't accepted it for himself. Now, when I talk about magical, I'm not talking about waving a wand, poof kind of thing. I'm talking about spirits and beings, good and bad, the ancestors, time shifting, just very much a very well described First Nations kind of pre-settlement, pre-colonization kind of a scenario. So that part is beautiful, even though unluckily for Jared, he seems to attract the worst kinds of magic. And so he's not only is he dealing with his crazy ass mom, he is dealing with the least likable elements of magic, and no one's really his protector. And at that point, I sort of have to pull away from the plot line, because it's kind of the completely uninformed hero on a journey towards, he doesn't even really realize he's on a journey to begin with, and he certainly has no ideas what the rules are of the world that he's beginning to encounter, and he doesn't even realize what the purpose of the journey would be. The only thing that he kind of comes to in terms of personal growth along the way, not the only thing, but the most significant one, is he really needs to stop drinking and doing drugs, because he can't discern the drunk blackouts from the hallucinations from this new reality. So we leave Jared at the end of the book where he's decided to sober up. So that's a good thing, because the first part of the book, there's a lot of drinking. Now, one of the things, this really is not a YA book. This was brought forward to my Woozles book club by one of the gals who had felt that Jared was a good enough character to meet the criterion for the Woozles book club, that it's mostly YA literature. But this is definitely not aimed at the average young teen. I think that the parental behavior is just very present and really devastating for the teenagers. Whereas, in a YA book, quite often the main protagonists, the adults, are not particularly in the picture. They're kind of just props to the plot, but these adults are definitely a significant part of the plot. So in the sort of lexicon of this kind of story, this is a really strong contender. I would give it a 5 out of 5. I was captured by all of the characters. They're all quite different. They've all got their own demons, as it were, that they're contending with. Some of them are aware that Jared has something going on that he has absolutely no conception of at all. So they're trying to protect him in their own way, but it's completely ineffective. So I sort of backtrack. He doesn't have any protectors. Let's just say they're ill-equipped for what he needs. And because of his rejection of things along the way, he's ill-equipped to understand the difference between someone who's trying to help him and someone who's trying to harm him. So, okay, so why did I really love this book? I would say I really love this book because Jared doesn't have an existential crisis over these magical elements coming into his life. It's just, it's kind of like, oh, fuck, and then let's get on with it. He has a couple of, like, oh, no, please, not me moments, but basically it's just part of his world, and he gets on with it, and it becomes a really fantastic, interesting world that he inhabits. I mean, in a way, if you like a thrill, if you're a person who likes that kind of adrenal rush and so forth, it's a really great place to be. Sophie, because of her naivety about what is going to be around her, she doesn't see the magic the way Jared does, and she's unconscious of her own powers, and there's no one around to guide her through her upcoming wilderness. So she's really a troubled teen. So she makes an interesting counterpoint to Jared. They have a romantic liaison, and that is also a very interesting, compare and contrast to the way they both approach the relationship. And the one thing about Sophie is that she's kind of the joker. She's the person who brings in the commentary from the outside world. And that she's always challenging the adults and Jared. How can you accept this patriarchal suppression of women's rights? Or how can you be part of the environmental rejectionism of, you know, blah-bitty, blah-bitty, blah. She's got the lingo, although she hasn't got the experience, and she certainly doesn't have the deep understanding, but she's certainly got the lingo jingo. So she kind of causes the people around her to occasionally stop and check themselves. Not that they do a good job of checking themselves, but, you know, that's part of where it's kind of humorous in a way, and it's tragic. She brings in that humorous, tragic kind of component to the story. So I loved this. I am going to read the second part, sorry. I think, well, I'm going to shout at Steve for a sec. What did you think of this?
I read it in 5 hours.
You read it in 5 hours. I think that's quite a recommendation. So book 2 is on its way. I understand that book 3 is being released in March. I could have that wrong. So I'm not even going to try and get that one for a while. I'm going to wait till the end of the summer and see whether the lineup is 100 for 4 copies, as it sometimes is at the library. So that's it for me. I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true. And I will see you next week with something, I don't know, something different. Talk to you later. Bye.